The day I bought my former boss's house was the day I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I remember standing in the driveway of Robert Harrison's colonial mansion in Buckhead, my attorney beside me, my hand resting on my swollen belly, 7 months pregnant now, staring at the for sale sign that had been hammered into his perfectly manicured lawn. The same lawn where he'd probably hosted countless backyard barbecues, clinking glasses with other executives, laughing about quarterly earnings while women like me scrambled to prove we deserved a seat at their table. "Are you sure about this, Aaliyah?" my attorney asked, her voice gentle but probing. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked up to the front door. Those grand double doors painted a pristine white, and I pressed my palm against the wood. It was cool, solid, indifferent. Just like Robert had been 6 months ago when he fired me. 6 months ago, I'd walked into his office on the 3rd floor of TechVantage Solutions, a rising tech giant in Atlanta's booming market, with a smile on my face and a secret I'd been dying to share. I'd just closed the Morehouse College partnership deal, a campaign that would bring in $500,000 in revenue. My numbers were flawless. My team loved me. I was thriving, and I was pregnant. I'd waited until after the deal closed to tell anyone. I knew the risks. I'd seen it happen to other women. Shanice from finance, demoted after her maternity leave. Kelly from ops, quietly phased out when she came back with a breast pump. But I thought I was different. I thought my performance, my value, my excellence would shield me. I was wrong. "Aaliyah, we're making some structural changes," Robert had said, not even looking up from his laptop. His voice was flat, rehearsed. "Your position is being eliminated effective immediately." I'd stood there, frozen, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. "Eliminated?" "Robert, I just brought in the Morehouse deal. I've exceeded every target you've set for me." He finally looked at me then, and I'll never forget his expression. Not anger, not regret, just inconvenience. Like I was a problem he needed to solve before his tea time. "This isn't personal, Aaliyah. It's business, but it was personal. It was personal when he'd passed me over for promotions. Personal when he'd interrupted me in meetings. Personal when he'd called me aggressive for the same assertiveness he praised in my white male colleagues. And it was deeply, devastatingly personal when he fired me 2 days after I'd announced my pregnancy in the break room. Now, standing outside his house, my house as of 30 minutes ago when I'd signed the closing papers, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even satisfaction. Just a quiet, powerful certainty. I'd spent years making myself smaller, softer, more palatable. Straightening my natural curls for client meetings. Laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Swallowing microaggressions like bitter pills because I needed the job, needed the paycheck, needed to prove I belonged. But I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I turned to my attorney and smiled. "I'm sure, because this wasn't just about buying a house. This was about reclaiming every piece of dignity Robert Harrison had tried to take from me. And honey, I was just getting started. Before I tell you how I got here, I need to know, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know where my people are at. Because this story, it's for every woman who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told she doesn't belong. Let's build this community together." My name is Aaliyah Johnson, and I need you to understand something before we go any further. I earned everything I ever had. Nobody handed me opportunities wrapped in a bow. Nobody smoothed the path or opened doors just because I smiled pretty. Every promotion, every raise, every single moment of recognition I received at TechVantage Solutions came from staying late when everyone else went home. From pitching ideas that got stolen and repackaged by colleagues who somehow always got the credit. From being twice as good to get half as far. That's just the reality when you're a Black woman in corporate America. You already know this if you've lived it. I was 34 years old, living in a modest but stylish loft in the old 4th Ward, Atlanta's heartbeat, where trap music bumps from passing cars and the smell of soul food drifts from corner restaurants. My place wasn't big, but it was mine. Exposed brick walls, vintage posters of Nina Simone and Lauryn Hill, plants in every corner because my grandmother always said a home without green is a home without life. I decorated it with pieces that told my story: African print throw pillows, a bookshelf crammed with Baldwin, Morrison, and hooks, a collection of hoop earrings hanging on a decorative stand because they weren't just accessories, they were armor. Every morning, I'd stand in front of my mirror, twist my natural curls into a high puff, or let them fall in their full glory around my shoulders, and I'd remind myself, you belong in those rooms. You've earned your seat at that table. TechVantage Solutions was one of Atlanta's rising stars in the tech world, a company that branded itself as innovative and diverse. They loved putting my face in their promotional materials. Dark skin, natural hair, warm smile, I was perfect for their Instagram posts about inclusion. What they didn't love was actually listening to me in strategy meetings or considering me for senior leadership roles. But I kept pushing. I had to. I'd been with TechVantage for 6 years, climbing from marketing coordinator to senior marketing manager. My specialty was brand partnerships with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. I understood that market intimately because I'd lived it. I was a Spelman woman, proud graduate of the class of 2013, and I knew how to speak to young Black students, their parents, their communities. I knew what messaging would resonate and what would feel exploitative. My campaigns brought in serious revenue. The partnership with Clark Atlanta University generated $300,000 in the first quarter alone. When I landed Morehouse College, one of the most prestigious HBCUs in the nation, I knew I'd done something major. $500,000 in projected revenue, a 3-year contract, and buzz that put TechVantage on the map in communities they'd never reached before. I was good at my job. Better than good. I was exceptional. My team knew it too. I managed 5 people, 3 women, 2 men, a beautiful mix of backgrounds and perspectives. We had rhythm together. Every Monday morning, we'd gather in the conference room with our coffee, and I'd start the same way. What are we grateful for this week? It wasn't corporate fluff. It was intentional. I wanted my team to feel seen, not just productive. Maya, my content strategist, would talk about her daughter's soccer games. James, my analytics guy, would share updates about his father's recovery from surgery. We celebrated birthdays, brought in food for potlucks, created a space where work didn't feel like slow death. "You make this place bearable, Aaliyah," Maya told me once, her voice soft and genuine. "You actually care about us as people, not just numbers on a performance report." I smiled, but her words hit deeper than she knew. I cared because nobody had cared about me when I was starting out. I'd had managers who saw me as a quota to fill, a diversity checkbox to mark. I swore I'd never make anyone on my team feel invisible. But outside my team, the dynamics were different. Robert Harrison was my direct superior, vice president of marketing operations. 56 years old, tall, imposing, with graying temples and an air of authority that filled every room he entered. He wore expensive suits, drove a Tesla Model S, and had a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Atlanta. To his face, I was professional, courteous, deferential even. I said yes, sir, and I appreciate the feedback, and let me revise that proposal. I played the game because I had bills to pay, ambitions to fulfill, and a mother in South Carolina who'd worked 3 jobs to put me through college. I couldn't afford to be the angry Black woman who didn't know her place, but I saw how Robert operated. I saw how he interrupted me in meetings, talking over my ideas only to have them repeated verbatim by Chad from sales 10 minutes later, and suddenly they were brilliant. I saw how he scrutinized my reports with a magnifying glass, finding flaws in Oxford commas, while green-lighting half-baked proposals from white colleagues who'd barely done the research. I saw how he looked at me sometimes, like I was an inconvenience, a problem he tolerated rather than an asset he valued. Still, I persisted. I documented everything, kept meticulous records of my wins, built relationships across departments. I had allies, other Black women scattered throughout TechVantage who'd text me after meetings, saying, "Girl, did you see how he dismissed you?" Or, "Stay strong, sis, we see you." That network mattered. Keisha from HR, Jasmine from product development. Nicole from Client Relations. We'd meet for happy hour at the rooftop bar on Edgewood, sipping wine and venting about the 1,000 tiny cuts that made up our workdays. The microaggressions. The tone policing. The exhaustion of being on all the time. Sometimes I just want to show up and do my job without having to be a representative for my entire race, Jasmine said once, swirling her Riesling. We all nodded. We all felt that. But then something happened that changed everything. I met someone. His name was Marcus, a freelance photographer I'd hired for a TechVantage campaign. Tall, dark-skinned, with locks that fell past his shoulders and a smile that made my stomach flip. We clicked immediately, not just physically, though Lord knows the chemistry was there, but intellectually, creatively. He saw the world through a lens that captured beauty in everyday moments, and I saw marketing strategies in everything. We dated casually for 3 months. Nothing serious, just good conversation, great food, and even better intimacy. He traveled a lot for work, and I was focused on my career. So we kept things light. And then I missed my period. Then I missed another one. I sat on the edge of my bathtub one October evening, staring at 3 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the counter. My heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack through my ribs. Pregnant. I was 34, single, and at a critical point in my career. This wasn't part of the plan. I'd always imagined having kids eventually. Maybe in my late 30s after I'd secured a director-level position, bought a house, found a stable partner. But life doesn't wait for your 5-year plan. I called Marcus that night. He was supportive but honest. Aaliyah, I care about you, but I'm not ready to be a father. I'll support you financially if you decide to keep it, but I can't promise more than that. I respected his honesty. I didn't need him to be my knight in shining armor. I just needed to know where he stood. I spent 2 weeks wrestling with the decision. I prayed, talked to my mother, cried in my car during lunch breaks. And eventually, clarity came. I wanted this baby, not because I had everything figured out. Not because the timing was perfect, but because somewhere in the chaos and uncertainty, I felt a pull toward motherhood that I couldn't ignore. This child would be mine, a piece of me that nobody could evaluate on a performance review or dismiss in a meeting. So I decided. I was keeping my baby, and I was going to announce it at work after I closed the Morehouse deal, when my value was undeniable, when my position felt secure. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush. The morning I announced my pregnancy at TechVantage, I wore my favorite blazer, a deep emerald green that popped against my brown skin, paired with gold hoop earrings and my natural curls styled in a twist-out that took me 45 minutes to perfect. I looked good. More importantly, I felt powerful. I'd just closed the Morehouse deal 2 days prior. The contract was signed, the press release was drafted, and the executive team had sent a company-wide email praising the groundbreaking partnership that would expand TechVantage's reach into underserved communities. My name was mentioned 3 times. 3. I'd screenshot that email and sent it to my mother with a string of praise hands emojis. You did that, baby girl, she'd texted back. Your daddy would be so proud. My father had passed when I was 19, a heart attack that came out of nowhere and took him before the ambulance arrived. He'd been a public school teacher in Charleston, a man who believed education was the pathway to freedom. He used to tell me, Aaliyah, you're brilliant. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. I carried his words with me everywhere. That Tuesday morning, I arrived at the office at 8:30, stopping by the break room where my team was gathered around the coffee machine. The break room was nothing special, standard corporate setup with a refrigerator covered in passive-aggressive notes about labeled lunches, a microwave that only worked on half power, and a pod coffee maker that we'd all chipped in to buy because the company provided coffee tasted like regret. Morning. Everyone, I said, setting my purse on the counter and reaching for a mug. There she is, James said, raising his coffee cup in mock salute. The woman who just made us all look good with that Morehouse deal. Maya grinned. I saw the email from corporate. 3 mentions, Aaliyah. 3. You're basically famous now. I laughed, feeling warmth spread through my chest. This was my team, my people. If I was going to tell anyone first, it would be them. Actually, I said, turning to face them, my hand instinctively moving to rest on my stomach. I have some news I want to share with you all. The room went quiet. 5 pairs of eyes locked on me. I took a breath. I'm pregnant. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Maya's face broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen, and she rushed forward to hug me. Oh my God, Aaliyah. Congratulations. She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, eyes searching mine. How are you feeling? When are you due? April, I said, smiling despite the nervousness fluttering in my stomach. I'm about 12 weeks along. And honestly, I'm terrified and excited and everything in between. James stepped forward next, his handshake turning into an awkward but genuine hug. That's amazing, seriously. You're going to be an incredible mom. The others chimed in with congratulations, questions, excitement. We talked about names and nursery themes and how I was managing the morning sickness, which for the record was a lie because it lasted all day, not just mornings. Someone suggested a team baby shower. Maya immediately started planning. For 15 beautiful minutes, I felt celebrated. I should have known it wouldn't last. Word spread fast in an office like ours. By lunchtime, it seemed like half the company knew. I received congratulatory emails from colleagues in other departments. A congrats, mama. Slack message from Keisha in HR. Even a fruit basket delivered to my desk from the product development team with a card signed by 12 people. But I also noticed the shifts. The subtle changes in how people looked at me. Robert Harrison passed me in the hallway around 2 p.m. I smiled and said, "Good afternoon, Robert," like I always did. He gave me a tight nod, his eyes flicking briefly to my stomach before he kept walking without a word. That look. I knew that look. It was the same look I'd seen on the faces of managers when other women announced their pregnancies. The mental calculation happening behind their eyes. Maternity leave. Doctor appointments. Reduced productivity. Liability. I pushed the thought away. I'd just delivered a massive win for the company. My performance was documented, undeniable. They couldn't touch me. I was wrong. The next morning, I arrived to find a meeting invitation in my Outlook calendar. 1-1 with Robert Harrison, 10 m, Conference Room B. No context. No agenda. Just the time and place. My stomach dropped. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he wanted to discuss the Morehouse rollout strategy. Maybe he had another HBCU partnership in mind. Maybe this was about that promotion to marketing director that had been dangled in front of me for the past year like a carrot I could never quite reach, maybe, but I'd been a Black woman in corporate America long enough to know when a white man in power asks for an unexpected private meeting, you should be worried. I spent the next hour trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting. I texted my girl Keisha in HR. Random meeting with Robert this morning. No agenda. Should I be concerned? She responded immediately. Do you want me to sit in as a witness? I almost said yes, but then I thought about optics, about seeming paranoid or confrontational. I'll be okay. Just keep your phone on. At 9:55, I walked to Conference Room B, my heels clicking against the polished floors. I'd dressed carefully again, a navy dress with a structured blazer, professional but not submissive. My hand rested briefly on my still flat stomach, a gesture that was becoming habit. You've got this, I told myself. You've done nothing wrong. Robert was already inside, sitting at the head of the table with his laptop open. He didn't look up when I entered. Close the door, he said. I did. Then took a seat across from him, folding my hands on the table. Good morning, Robert. What can I help you with? He finally looked at me, and his expression was completely neutral. Not angry. Not sympathetic, just blank, and somehow that was worse. Aaliyah, I'll get straight to the point. We're making some structural changes to the marketing department, and unfortunately, your position is being eliminated. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my breath catch in my throat. Eliminated? I repeated, certain I'd misheard. My position is being eliminated? Effective immediately. We'll provide you with 2 weeks severance and continuation of your health benefits for 30 days. HR will reach out with the paperwork. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for some indication that this was a mistake, but his face remained impassive. Robert, I just closed the Morehouse deal. I brought in $500,000 in revenue. My performance reviews have been consistently excellent. How is my position being eliminated? He sighed like I was being difficult, like I was the problem. This isn't about performance, Aaliyah. It's about restructuring. We're consolidating roles to improve efficiency. Consolidating, I said slowly. So who's taking over my responsibilities? That hasn't been determined yet. And my team? What happens to them? They'll report to someone else. The details are still being worked out. I felt heat rising in my chest, spreading to my face. Every instinct told me to stay calm, stay professional, don't give him ammunition. But I couldn't stop myself. This is about my pregnancy, isn't it? His jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation, Aaliyah. It's a serious coincidence, Robert. I announced my pregnancy 2 days ago, and now suddenly my position is being eliminated? A position that was perfectly fine last week when you were praising my work? I understand you're upset, but upset? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I'm not upset, Robert. I'm recognizing what's happening here. You're firing me because I'm pregnant. That's discrimination. That's illegal. He stood too, and suddenly I was reminded of how much taller he was, how much space he took up. You're not being fired, Aaliyah. Your position is being eliminated. That's a business decision and it's final. I suggest you start transitioning your work today. I want this in writing, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to control it. I want the reasons for this elimination documented. HR will provide all necessary documentation. He closed his laptop with a decisive snap. I'm sorry it's come to this, but sometimes these decisions have to be made. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. The dismissiveness in his tone, like I was a minor inconvenience. Like 6 years of my life in labor meant nothing. That's what broke something inside me. I walked out of that conference room, past the cubicles in the break room where I'd announced my pregnancy just 48 hours earlier, past Maya who looked up from her desk with concern in her eyes, past the reception area with its TechVantage Innovation for Everyone banner hanging on the wall. I made it to my car before I started crying. Sitting in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel, I let it all pour out, the rage, the humiliation, the fear. I was pregnant and unemployed. I had rent to pay, doctor bills coming, a baby arriving in 5 months. And I'd just been discarded like I was nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya? What happened? Are you okay? I didn't respond. I couldn't form words yet. Another buzz. Keisha, I just heard. I'm so sorry. This is wrong. Document everything. Then my mother. Praying for you today, baby. Call me when you can. I sat there for 20 minutes, mascara running down my face, my whole body shaking. And then slowly something shifted. The tears stopped. My breathing steadied. And in their place came something sharper, harder, clarity. I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app, and started typing everything I could remember from that meeting. Every word Robert said. Every dismissive gesture. The timeline of events. Announcement on Tuesday, firing on Wednesday. I documented the Morehouse deal, my performance reviews, the congratulatory emails that were probably still sitting in my inbox. Then I did something I'd never done before. I opened Instagram, switched my account from private to public, and I started recording. My face filled the screen, makeup smudged, eyes red, sitting in my car in a corporate parking garage. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who just had her life upended. My name is Aaliyah Johnson, I said, my voice rough but steady. And I need to tell you what just happened to me. I told them everything. The announcement. The meeting. The firing disguised as restructuring. I talked about being a Black woman in corporate America, about the double standards and the silent dismissals. I talked about fear and survival and what it means to be pregnant and suddenly jobless. They think I'll just disappear quietly, I said, looking directly into the camera. They think I'll take my severance and my 30 days of health insurance and vanish. But I'm not disappearing. I'm not staying quiet, because if this happened to me, it's happening to other women, and it needs to stop. I posted it without overthinking, without editing, without fear. Then I drove home, exhausted and hollow, and fell asleep on my couch with my hand on my belly, whispering to my baby, "We're going to be okay. I promise. We're going to be okay." I had no idea that while I slept, my video was already being shared, commented on, and viewed thousands of times. The fight was just beginning. I woke up to my phone vibrating like it was having a seizure. It was barely past 7 a.m., gray morning light filtering through my curtains, and my phone, which I'd left on the coffee table before passing out in emotional exhaustion, was lighting up every few seconds with notifications. Instagram, Twitter, text, messages, emails. The buzz was constant, relentless, almost angry. My first thought was that something was wrong. Maybe my mother had an emergency. Maybe Marcus was trying to reach me. I grabbed the phone, my heart already racing, and stared at the screen. Instagram, 247 new notifications. Twitter, 89 new notifications. Text messages, 31 unread. What the hell? I opened Instagram first, and my breath caught in my throat. The video I'd posted yesterday, the raw, tearful confession I'd recorded in my car, had exploded. When I'd fallen asleep, it had maybe 200 views and a handful of supportive comments from friends. Now, 1,000 views, 200 comments, 800 shares, and the numbers were climbing as I watched. My hands started shaking. I scrolled through the comments, barely able to process what I was seeing. This happened to me too. Nobody believed me. Thank you for speaking up. I'm crying. This is exactly what they do to Black women. Exactly. Sending this to every woman I know. This is why we need unions. What company is this? They need to be exposed. Sue them. Take everything. We're behind you, sis. There were negative comments too. There always are. People calling me dramatic, suggesting I must have been a bad employee, asking why I didn't just handle it privately. But they were drowned out by the overwhelming wave of support, of recognition, of women saying me too. This happened to me too. I switched to Twitter and found that someone had screen recorded my Instagram video and posted it there. That tweet had 15,000 retweets and was still climbing. People were tagging TechVantage's official account, demanding answers. Local Atlanta news accounts were starting to pick it up. A hashtag was forming. Justice for Aaliyah. I sat there on my couch, still wearing yesterday's dress, makeup smeared across my face, and I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I had started something I couldn't control. My phone rang. Maya. Aaliyah. Oh my God, are you okay? Her voice was urgent, breathless. Your video is everywhere. Like everywhere. It's all over my timeline. People at work are freaking out. What do you mean, freaking out? Robert is in emergency meetings with the executive team. HR is scrambling. Someone from corporate communications came down to our floor asking questions about you, about your performance, about whether any of us witnessed the firing. It's chaos. I pressed my palm against my forehead, trying to process. Maya, I just needed to say something. I didn't expect it to blow up like this. Girl, you spoke truth. Of course it blew up. Do you know how many women go through this exact thing and never say a word? You gave them a voice. She paused. But Aaliyah, you need to be careful. They're going to come after you. They're going to try to discredit you. Let them try, I said, and I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. I documented everything. I have emails, performance reviews, the timeline. I have the truth. Good. Hold on to that. And listen. If you need anything, if you need someone to testify or provide evidence, I'm here. So is James. So is the whole team. We've got your back. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, letting it all sink in. Then I opened my laptop and started reading. The video had jumped platforms. It was on TikTok now. where a user with 200,000 followers had stitched it with her own story of pregnancy discrimination. It was in Facebook groups dedicated to working mothers, to Black professionals, to women in tech. Someone had uploaded it to LinkedIn, where it was generating thousands of reactions and comments from people sharing their own corporate horror stories. News outlets were starting to notice too. Atlanta's local station, 11 Alive, had posted an article. Local tech employee says she was fired after pregnancy. Announcement. Video goes viral. They'd embedded my Instagram video and were asking TechVantage for comment. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution had picked it up. So had Essence magazine. The Shade Room posted it with the caption, "This is what they don't want you to see. Black women stay catching hell in the workplace. Justice for Aaliyah." I refreshed my Instagram. 78,000 views now. My DMs were flooded. Women sending me their stories. Dozens of them, hundreds of them. A woman in Chicago who'd been demoted after announcing her pregnancy. A woman in Houston who'd been placed on a performance improvement plan the week she came back from maternity leave. A woman in Detroit who'd been fired while she was still in the hospital recovering from a C-section. Each story was a knife to the heart. Each one confirmed what I'd always known, but tried not to believe. This wasn't personal. This was systematic. And then I saw a message that made me sit up straight. It was from an attorney named Diane Mitchell, a partner at Mitchell & Associates, a firm specializing in employment discrimination law. Her message was brief and professional. "Ms. Johnson, I've seen your video and I'd like to discuss your case. What happened to you appears to be clear pregnancy discrimination under federal and Georgia state law. If you're interested in pursuing legal action, please contact my office. First consultation is free. No obligation." She included her phone number and email address. I stared at that message for a long time. Legal action meant war. It meant depositions and court dates and facing Robert Harrison again. It meant my life becoming public, every detail scrutinized, every decision questioned. It meant months, maybe years of fighting, but it also meant justice. Not just for me, but for every woman who'd sent me their story, who'd said thank you for speaking up because they couldn't. I called my mother. "Baby, I saw your video," she said before I could even say hello. Her voice was tight with emotion. "Oh, Aaliyah, I'm so proud of you and so worried about you at the same time. Mama, it's blowing up. Like really blowing up. News stations are covering it. An attorney reached out about suing them. Do you want to sue them?" I hesitated. "I don't know. I'm scared. This could get ugly. Baby girl, it's already ugly. They made it ugly when they fired you for being pregnant. The question is, are you going to let them get away with it?" I closed my eyes and I thought about my father. About his belief that education was the pathway to freedom, that speaking truth to power was a responsibility, not a choice. I thought about the baby growing inside me, about what kind of world I wanted to bring her into. "No," I said quietly, "I'm not going to let them get away with it." "Then you call that attorney. And you fight. You fight like hell, Aaliyah. Not just for you, for all of us." After we hung up, I emailed Diane Mitchell. Within an hour, we had a consultation scheduled for the next day. Meanwhile, the video kept spreading. By the afternoon, it had hit national platforms. Tamika Mallory, the activist, shared it with a caption about systemic discrimination. Jamili Hill tweeted about it. Even some celebrities were picking it up. Issa Rae's team reached out to say she'd seen it and wanted to amplify my voice. 50,000 views. 12,000 shares. Trending on 3 platforms. TechVantage released a statement that evening. It was posted on their website and social media. TechVantage Solutions is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of our business. We take all allegations of discrimination seriously and are conducting a thorough internal review. Due to privacy and legal considerations, we cannot comment on individual personnel matters. We remain dedicated to creating a workplace where all employees feel valued and respected. It was corporate speak for. We're not admitting anything. And we hope this blows over. But it wasn't blowing over. The comments under their statement were brutal. People were calling them out, posting screenshots of their diverse and inclusive marketing materials next to my video. Someone dug up statistics showing that TechVantage's leadership was 87% white and 73% male. Another person found a Glassdoor review from 2 years ago where a former employee, a Black woman, had written about experiencing discrimination but not being believed by HR. People were organizing. Someone created a Change.org petition demanding that I be reinstated and Robert Harrison be investigated. It got 15,000 signatures in 6 hours. Local activist groups were planning a demonstration outside TechVantage's headquarters. The Atlanta chapter of the National Organization for Women reached out to offer support. It was overwhelming, terrifying, powerful. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started making lists. What I needed to do, who I needed to talk to, what evidence I needed to gather. I wrote down every microaggression I could remember, every time Robert had undermined me, every instance where I'd been treated differently than my white colleagues. I documented the Morehouse deal, the emails proving I'd led it, the revenue projections, the praise I'd received. I printed out my performance reviews from the past 3 years. Every one of them marked exceeds expectations or outstanding. I gathered emails where Robert had complimented my work. Right up until the week I announced my pregnancy, I screenshot the company-wide announcement about the Morehouse partnership with my name mentioned 3 times, and then I wrote a timeline. November 14th, closed Morehouse deal. November 16th, announced pregnancy to team. November 17th, word spreads throughout office. November 18th, fired by Robert Harrison. November 18th, posted video. November 19th, video goes viral. The pattern was undeniable. The evidence was clear. I was building a case. Around midnight, my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. Is this Aaliyah Johnson? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name is David Chen. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. I'm working on a story about pregnancy discrimination in the tech industry, and your video has become a significant part of that conversation. Would you be willing to speak with me on the record? The New York Times. The New York Times wanted to interview me. I thought about saying no, about protecting myself, staying small, not making waves bigger than they already were. But then I thought about all those DMs, all those women sharing their stories, all those voices that had been silenced for so long. Yes, I said. I'll talk to you. We scheduled an interview for the following week. He told me the story would likely run in their business section, possibly front page. He said my case was part of a larger investigation they'd been working on about how pregnant women, especially women of color, are systematically pushed out of corporate America. After we hung up, I walked to my window and looked out at Atlanta's skyline, the lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Robert Harrison was probably panicking. Somewhere out there, TechVantage executives were scrambling to contain the damage. And somewhere out there, women were watching my video and finding the courage to speak up about their own experiences. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the slight curve that was just starting to show. You're already changing things, I whispered to my baby. And you're not even here yet. I didn't sleep much that night. But for the first time since walking into Robert's office, I felt something other than fear and despair. I felt powerful. The atmosphere at TechVantage Solutions was imploding, and I wasn't even there to witness it firsthand, but I heard everything. Maya became my inside source, texting me updates throughout the day like a war correspondent reporting from enemy territory. Keisha from HR, despite the risk to her own position, would call me in the evenings with information she probably shouldn't have been sharing. Even James, who was typically cautious about workplace politics, sent me screenshots of internal Slack channels where employees were openly questioning leadership. The day after the New York Times reached out, Maya texted me, "Emergency all-hands meeting in 10 minutes. Robert looks like he's aged 5 years overnight." I sat on my couch, my laptop open in front of me, refreshing Twitter and Instagram compulsively. My video had crossed 500,000 views. The hashtag Chai Justice for Aaliyah was trending in Atlanta and several other major cities. News crews had shown up at TechVantage's headquarters that morning, cameras pointed at the sleek glass building, reporters interviewing employees as they arrived for work. Someone had leaked Robert's name. I don't know who, maybe someone from my team, maybe a journalist who did their research, but by midday Wednesday, his full identity was public knowledge. Robert Harrison, Vice President of Marketing Operations, age 56, resident of Buckhead. His LinkedIn profile, his professional history, even a photo of him from some tech industry conference where he was shaking hands with the CEO. The internet is relentless when it catches a scent. People found his social media accounts. His Facebook profile picture was him on a golf course, smiling broadly, arm around another white man in expensive athleisure wear. His Twitter bio described him as a marketing innovator, tech enthusiast, proud Georgian. Someone screenshot a tweet from 3 months ago where he'd shared a TechVantage post about their commitment to diversity with the caption, "Proud to work for a company that walks the talk on inclusion." The irony was not lost on anyone. You fired a pregnant black woman 2 days after she announced her pregnancy. But go off about inclusion, one reply said. It had 8,000 likes. His mentions became a war zone. People were calling him out, dragging him, demanding accountability. Someone created a parody account called Robert Harrison's Conscience that posted things like, Day 3 of pretending firing Aaliyah was about restructuring and not blatant discrimination. Still not sleeping well? It would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. Maya called me during her lunch break, her voice low and urgent. Aaliyah, you need to hear what happened in that meeting. I put her on speaker and settled into my couch. Tell me everything. Okay, so we all gathered in the main conference hall, like the entire Atlanta office, probably 200 people. Robert stood up front with the CEO, Marcus Bradley, who flew in from San Francisco specifically for this. You could feel the tension. People were pissed. What did they say? Marcus did most of the talking. He gave this whole speech about how TechVantage values every employee, how they take discrimination allegations seriously, how they're conducting a full investigation, standard corporate damage control. But then, and this is the crazy part, someone from product development stood up and asked directly, why was Aaliyah Johnson fired 2 days after announcing her pregnancy? I sat up straighter. Who asked that? Jasmine, from product dev. She just stood up in front of everyone and asked it. You could hear a pin drop. What did they say? Robert tried to answer, said something about personnel decisions being confidential and based on business needs. But Jasmine wasn't having it. She said, that's not an answer. She just closed our biggest HBCU partnership deal. Her team loved her. Her performance was excellent. The timing is suspicious at best and discriminatory at worst. I felt tears prick my eyes. Jasmine and I weren't even that close. We'd had maybe a dozen conversations over the years, mostly at happy hours. But she'd stood up. In front of the entire company. She'd stood up. Then what happened? Other people started speaking up. Someone from engineering pointed out that 3 women had left the company in the past 2 years after getting pregnant. Someone else mentioned the Glassdoor reviews about discrimination. It turned into this whole thing. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. Robert's face was red, like actually red. I thought he might have a stroke. How did it end? Marcus said they're bringing in an external firm to conduct a full review of HR practices, and that anyone with concerns should contact a confidential hotline they're setting up. Then he basically ran out of there. The meeting lasted 20 minutes instead of the scheduled hour. After we hung up, I sat in silence, processing everything. Employees were speaking up. The company was in crisis mode. The media pressure was intensifying, and then my phone rang. Diane Mitchell, the employment attorney. Aaliyah, I've been reviewing your case materials, she said, her voice crisp and professional. This is one of the clearest cases of pregnancy discrimination I've seen in 15 years of practice. The timeline alone is damning. But what really strengthens your position is the documentation you've provided, your performance reviews, the Morehouse deal, the emails praising your work right up until your announcement. So you think we have a case? I think we have an excellent case. Federal law under the Pregnancy Discrimination Act is explicit. Employers cannot discriminate against employees because of pregnancy, childbirth, or related conditions. Georgia state law provides additional protections. The temporal proximity between your announcement and termination creates what we call a presumption of discrimination. The burden shifts to them to prove legitimate business reasons. And frankly, I don't think they can. My heart was pounding. What happens next? First, we file a charge with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that's required before we can proceed with a federal lawsuit. Then we engage in what's called conciliation, where the EEOC tries to facilitate a resolution. If that doesn't work, we file suit in federal court. Given the publicity around your case, I expect TechVantage will want to settle quickly to avoid prolonged litigation and additional reputational damage. How long does this process take? It varies. EOC charges can take several months to process, but given the high-profile nature of your case, it might move faster. If we end up in court, we're looking at a year, maybe 18 months. But again, I think settlement is likely. And what kind of settlement are we talking about? She paused. Based on comparable cases, considering your salary, the strength of evidence, emotional distress, potential lost wages, and especially the egregious nature of the discrimination, we're looking at somewhere between $500,000 and $2 million. Possibly more if we go to trial and win, especially if we can prove a pattern of discrimination beyond just your case. $2 million. The number felt surreal. There's something else you should know, Diane continued. I've been contacted by 3 other women who worked at TechVantage, former employees who saw your video and want to share their experiences. All of them are Black or Latina. All of them experience discrimination related to pregnancy or family planning. If they're willing to come forward, it strengthens the case for a pattern and practice of discrimination. Would they have to go public? Not necessarily. They could provide depositions or testimony that remains sealed. But if they're willing to go public, it creates additional pressure on the company. After our call, I spent the afternoon reaching out to those women. Their stories broke my heart and fueled my determination in equal measure. Destiny, who'd worked in finance 3 years ago, fired 2 weeks after returning from maternity leave, told her performance had declined. She'd been with the company for 5 years, never had a negative review until she became a mother. Carmen, from client relations, pressured to postpone getting pregnant because it wasn't a good time for the team. When she got pregnant anyway, she was systematically excluded from major projects and eventually pushed out through a hostile work environment. Naya, from software development, asked in a job interview whether she planned to have children soon. When she filed a complaint about the inappropriate question, she was labeled difficult to work with and never received an offer despite being the most qualified candidate. Each conversation made me angrier and more resolved. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a system that punished women for the crime of being capable of pregnancy. Meanwhile, the media storm continued to build. The New York Times interview happened via video call. David Chen was thorough, asking detailed questions about my experience, the timeline, the impact on my mental health and financial stability. He told me they were interviewing labor economists, civil rights attorneys, and other women who'd experienced similar discrimination. The story would run the following Sunday in the business section. Local news stations were running segments almost daily. I did an interview with 11 Alive, sitting in my living room with my curls framing my face and my hand resting protectively on my growing belly. The interviewer, a Black woman named Cheryl, asked questions that felt less like journalism and more like sisterhood. "What do you want people to understand about what happened to you?" she asked. I looked directly into the camera. I want people to understand that this is not rare. This is not an isolated incident. Black women, Latina women, immigrant women, we face this constantly. We're told to work twice as hard to get half as far, and then when we do that, when we excel, we're still disposable the moment we become inconvenient. Pregnancy is not a liability. Motherhood is not a weakness. And companies need to stop treating women like we're problems to be solved instead of assets to be valued. The interview aired that evening and was shared thousands of times. TechVantage, meanwhile, was hemorrhaging. Their stock price had dropped by 12%. Not catastrophic, but enough to make investors nervous. Several major clients, including 2 universities with which they had contracts, announced they were reviewing their partnerships with the company. The NAACP released a statement expressing concern about the allegations and calling for a thorough investigation, and then Robert Harrison made a mistake. He gave an interview. Not to a major outlet, but to a tech industry blog called Innovation Today, probably thinking it would be a friendly audience. In the interview, he tried to defend himself, to explain that the termination was purely business-related and had nothing to do with Ms. Johnson's pregnancy. But then the interviewer asked, "Do you stand by your decision to terminate Ms. Johnson?" And Robert said, "Look, sometimes personnel decisions have to be made for the good of the company. I have nothing against Aaliyah personally, but we had to consider what was best for team dynamics and operational efficiency moving forward." Are you saying that her pregnancy would have affected team dynamics and operational efficiency? I'm saying that we made a business decision based on multiple factors. It was a disaster. The interview made everything worse. Legal experts on Twitter immediately pointed out that his comments could be used as evidence of discriminatory intent, considering what's best for the team in the context of a pregnant employee was basically an admission that her pregnancy factored into the decision. Diane called me within an hour of the interview being published. "Did you see what he just did?" I saw. He basically handed us the case on a silver platter. His lawyer must be losing their mind, right? Now, by Friday of that week, less than 7 days after I'd posted my video, TechVantage announced that Robert Harrison was being placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation. It was the first crack in his armor. The first sign that consequences were coming. Maya texted me, "He's out." Packed up his office this afternoon. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Just left. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I hadn't set out to destroy Robert's career. I just wanted to tell the truth. But the truth has a way of burning down everything built on lies. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, my hand on my belly, feeling my baby move for the first time, tiny flutters like butterflies trapped under my skin. "Your mama is a fighter," I whispered. "And we're winning." Filing the EEOC charge felt like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. I met Diane at her office on a cold December morning, the kind where Atlanta pretends it has winter. Her firm was in Midtown, occupying the 10th floor of a glass high-rise with a view that stretched across the city. The waiting room had that expensive minimalism that whispered "we win" cases. Sleek furniture, abstract art, a receptionist who offered me sparkling water in an actual glass, not a plastic cup. Diane's office was all business. Diplomas from Howard University and Yale Law School hung on the wall. Framed articles about cases she'd won, a photo of her with John Lewis at some civil rights event. She was in her early 50s, black, with silver-streaked locks pulled into a bun and reading glasses that she kept pushing up her nose as she reviewed documents. "Before we file this, I need you to understand what you're signing up for," she said, looking at me over those glasses. "TechVantage is going to come at you hard. They're going to dig into your work history, your personal life, your social media. They'll look for anything they can use to discredit you or justify their decision. They'll paint you as a problem employee, someone who didn't get along with colleagues, someone whose performance was declining. They'll twist the narrative until you don't recognize your own story." I met her gaze steadily. "Let them try. I have the receipts," she smiled slightly. "Yes, you do. But I need you to be prepared for how ugly this might get. Are you ready for that?" I thought about my baby, already 19 weeks along, already making her presence known with those butterfly kicks. I thought about Destiny, Carmen, and Nia, the other women whose stories mirrored mine. I thought about every woman who'd sent me a DM saying thank you for being brave. "I'm ready," I said. We filed the charge that afternoon. The EEOC would serve TechVantage within days, and then the real fight would begin. The company's response came faster than expected. Within a week, their attorney, some high-powered partner from a corporate firm whose name had 3 parts and sounded like a law school building, sent a 30-page response denying everything. According to their version of events, I was a satisfactory but not outstanding employee whose position had been eliminated as part of a long-planned restructuring that had nothing whatsoever to do with her pregnancy. They claimed the Morehouse deal, while appreciated, was primarily executed by the broader team, and that my role had been coordinator rather than leader. They said my performance reviews, while positive, showed areas of concern regarding interpersonal dynamics and receptiveness to feedback. They even produced an email from 8 months prior where Robert had made a note about my occasionally defensive communication style in a meeting. It was character assassination. Dressed up in legal language, Diane and I sat in her office, going through their response line by line. "This is standard," she said, highlighting sections with a yellow marker. "They're trying to create an alternative narrative. But look here, they claim this was a long-planned restructuring, yet they can't produce any documentation of planning that predates your pregnancy announcement. No emails, no memos, no strategic plans mentioning the elimination of your position. Because it didn't exist," I said bitterly. "They made it up on the spot." "Exactly. And we're going to prove that." She pulled out another document. "I've subpoenaed their internal communications, emails, Slack messages, meeting notes, from the 6 months before and after your termination. We're also requesting documentation about every personnel decision Robert Harrison made in the past 3 years, specifically looking for patterns of how pregnant employees or mothers were treated. What about the other women? Destiny, Carmen, and Nia? They've all agreed to provide declarations under oath. Destiny's particularly powerful. She was fired 2 weeks after maternity leave, and her performance reviews show she was exemplary right up until she became a mother. That establishes a pattern. Over the next few months, the discovery process became consuming. Diane's team requested thousands of documents. TechVantage fought every request, claiming privilege, irrelevance, undue burden. We went back and forth with motions and counter-motions, judges' orders and compliance deadlines. But slowly, the truth started emerging from the paper trail. In January, we received a batch of emails that made my blood boil. One was from Robert to another executive, sent 3 days after my pregnancy announcement. "Need to discuss Aaliyah's situation. Timing is problematic given Q1 goals. Let's talk offline." Another sent to HR the morning of my termination. "Moving forward with the restructuring we discussed. Please prepare termination paperwork for A. Johnson. Effective immediately." There was no paper trail of restructuring discussions before that email. Nothing. They'd created the justification retroactively. "This is gold," Diane said when she showed me. "This proves the decision was made immediately after your announcement, and the restructuring narrative was fabricated to cover it up." We also discovered something even more damning. TechVantage had hired someone to replace me exactly 3 weeks after my termination. A white man named Brett Calloway, brought in as Senior Marketing Director, a position that didn't exist before, but whose job description was almost identical to mine, just with a fancier title. "They didn't eliminate your position," Diane said, her voice sharp with vindication. "They eliminated you and replaced you with someone they deemed more convenient. That's textbook discrimination." In February, depositions began. I had to sit in a conference room across from TechVantage's attorneys, 3 of them, all white, all men, all wearing suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and answer questions for 7 hours. They asked about everything. My work history, my relationships with colleagues, my performance on specific campaigns. They showed me emails I'd written 2 years ago, asking me to explain what I meant by certain phrases. They asked about my social media posts, my personal life, whether I'd planned the pregnancy. That last question made me want to flip the table. "Whether I planned my pregnancy is irrelevant and invasive," I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. But since you asked, no, it wasn't planned. It was a surprise. A beautiful surprise. And the fact that you think my reproductive choices have any bearing on my professional competence is exactly the problem. Diane, sitting beside me, put a hand on my arm. A silent good job, but let me handle this. That question is inappropriate and we're not answering it, she told them firmly. Move on. They tried to paint me as difficult, as someone who played the race card when I didn't get my way. They brought up a meeting from a year ago where I'd pushed back on a marketing strategy I thought was culturally tone-deaf. You disagreed with Mr. Harrison's approach to the campaign? One attorney asked. I provided feedback based on my expertise in marketing to Black communities, yes. And how did Mr. Harrison receive that feedback? He dismissed it. He told me I was overthinking things and that we should proceed with his original plan. Did you continue to object? I continued to advocate for a strategy that wouldn't alienate our target audience. That's my job. Or it was until I was fired for being pregnant. The attorney frowned. Ms. Johnson, you weren't fired for being pregnant. Then why was I fired 2 days after announcing my pregnancy, after 6 years of excellent performance and having just closed a $500,000 deal? I leaned forward. Explain that to me in a way that makes sense. He couldn't. He moved on to another line of questioning. Robert's deposition was even more revealing. Diane conducted it, and she was surgical in her precision. Mr. Harrison, when did you first learn that Ms. Johnson was pregnant? I believe it was November 16th. And when did you make the decision to terminate her employment? The decision was part of a broader restructuring that had been under consideration for some time. When specifically did you decide to terminate her employment? He hesitated. I made the final decision on November 17th. The day after learning she was pregnant. The timing was coincidental. Coincidental, Diane repeated flatly. She pulled out a document. Mr. Harrison, I'm showing you an email you sent to your wife on the evening of November 16th. Can you read the highlighted portion for the record? I watched his face go pale as he read the email Diane's team had subpoenaed from his personal account. It says, Aaliyah announced she's pregnant. This complicates things with the team restructuring we need to do. What restructuring were you referring to? I don't recall the specific details. Mr. Harrison, there is no documentation of any restructuring plan before this email. No memos, no strategic planning documents, no budget proposals. The first mention of restructuring anywhere in TechVantage's records is in your email to HR the morning you fired Ms. Johnson. So I'll ask again, what restructuring were you referring to in your email to your wife? Silence. Mr. Harrison, I may have been referring to future planning discussions. Future planning discussions that resulted in Ms. Johnson being fired the very next day, but left every other member of her team employed? He had no good answer. The deposition transcript was devastating. By March, TechVantage was in settlement talks. Their initial offer was insulting, $150,000 and a mutual non-disclosure agreement that would have prevented me from ever speaking about what happened. Absolutely not, I told Diane. They want to pay me to be quiet. That's what they've always wanted. I'm not taking it. I told them you wouldn't, Diane said, smiling slightly. I also told them our demand, $2.5 million, a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, policy changes to prevent future discrimination, and no NDA. You get to keep telling your story. They refused. We prepared for trial, but something else was happening while we fought in conference rooms and courtrooms. The court of public opinion was rendering its own verdict. The New York Times piece had run in January, a devastating 4,000-word investigation into pregnancy discrimination in tech. I was the centerpiece, but the article included data showing that pregnant women in tech were 47% more likely to receive negative performance reviews than their non-pregnant peers. It profiled 6 other women, including Destiny. It called out TechVantage by name and identified Robert Harrison as a case study in discriminatory management practices. The article was nominated for a Pulitzer. Other outlets picked up the story. NPR did a segment. The Atlantic ran an opinion piece about how pregnancy discrimination was a form of economic violence against women. Someone made a short documentary about my case that went viral on YouTube, and through it all, my belly kept growing. By April, I was visibly, undeniably pregnant. 28 weeks. Then 30. Then 32. I did interviews with my hand on my belly, a visual reminder of what this was really about. I spoke at a conference for women in tech, sharing my story to a room of 500 people who gave me a standing ovation. I testified before the Georgia State Legislature about the need for stronger pregnancy discrimination protections. I was 7 months pregnant when TechVantage came back with a new settlement offer. $1.8 million, a public statement acknowledging that my termination did not reflect the company's values, mandatory anti-discrimination training for all managers, and no NDA requirement. We negotiated. Back and forth. Diane was relentless. The final settlement, $2.2 million, a public apology acknowledging wrongdoing, policy reforms, and Robert Harrison's permanent departure from the company. I signed the papers on a Friday afternoon in late April, my hand cramping from holding the pen, my daughter doing somersaults inside me like she knew something big was happening. When it was done, Diane handed me a copy of the executed agreement and said, "You did it, Aaliyah. You won." I looked at that number, 2,200,000, and I felt numb, then overwhelmed, then fierce. "No," I said quietly. "We won. All of us." That evening, I posted an update on Instagram, a photo of me at 34 weeks pregnant, my hand on my belly, standing in front of the courthouse. Justice isn't just about money. It's about acknowledgement. It's about change. It's about making sure the next woman doesn't have to fight the fight I fought. Today, TechVantage Solutions admitted they were wrong. Today, they paid for their discrimination. Today, we won. But the work isn't done. Keep speaking up. Keep fighting. Keep demanding better. For all of us. The post got 500,000 likes in 6 hours. The money hit my account on a Tuesday morning in early May. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, scrolling through emails about media requests I'd never get to, when my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. I'd set up alerts for any transaction over $1,000, mostly to catch fraud. I definitely wasn't expecting to see. Deposit, $2,200,000. I stared at the screen until the numbers started to blur. Then I refreshed the app, convinced it was a glitch. But no, the balance was real. After taxes and Diane's contingency fee, I was looking at just over $1.4 million in my personal account. My hands started shaking. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode, and just sat there in my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd cried into cheap wine after bad dates, where I'd meal prepped on Sunday nights to save money, where I'd calculated and recalculated my budget every month to make sure I could cover rent and student loans and still have enough left over to send my mother money when she needed it. And now I was a millionaire. I called my mother first. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey, baby. How you feeling? That baby treating you okay?" "Mama," I said, and my voice cracked. The money came through. "It's in my account." Silence. Then, "All of it?" "All of it." I heard her breath catch, heard what might have been a sob or a laugh or both. "Oh, Aaliyah, oh, baby. Your daddy would be so proud. So proud." We cried together over the phone for a solid 5 minutes, not saying anything, just letting the emotion pour out. This wasn't just about the money. This was about vindication. This was about a system that had tried to crush me and failed. This was about standing up and fighting back and winning against impossible odds. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked when we could finally speak again. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But Mama, the first thing I'm doing is paying off your mortgage. And don't argue with me." "Aaliyah, don't. You worked 3 jobs to put me through college. You sacrificed everything for me." "I'm paying off your house and that's final." She cried again. So did I. After we hung up, I sat with the reality of what this money meant. It wasn't just financial security, though God knows that mattered, especially with a baby coming in 6 weeks. It was freedom. Freedom from the fear that kept me quiet for so long. Freedom from the need to make myself small to keep a job I didn't even want anymore. Freedom to build something new, something mine, something that mattered. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process everything while also preparing for the baby's arrival. My apartment was filling up with things I'd been slowly collecting: a crib, a changing table, tiny clothes that didn't seem real because how could a human be that small? Friends had thrown me a baby shower in April. A beautiful afternoon at Jasmine's house with decorations in yellow and gray, games I pretended to enjoy, and genuine love from women who'd watched me fight and win. But now, staring at that bank balance, I realized something. I didn't want to bring my daughter home to this apartment. It was fine for me, but I wanted more for her. I wanted space. I wanted a yard. I wanted a home that wasn't just survival, but thriving. I started looking at houses. Atlanta's real estate market was competitive, especially in the neighborhoods I was interested in. Places with good schools, diverse communities, tree-lined streets where kids rode bikes and neighbors knew each other's names. I looked at listings in East Atlanta, in Kirkwood, in Reynoldstown. Beautiful homes, all of them. But nothing felt quite right. And then, scrolling through Zillow on a Thursday afternoon, I saw it. A colonial-style house in Buckhead. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, 2-story with a wraparound porch, hardwood floors, a renovated kitchen with marble countertops, a master suite with a walk-in closet bigger than my current bedroom, backyard with a pool and mature trees providing shade, nearly 4,000 square feet of space. The listing price, $875,000. I recognized the address immediately. I'd only been there once, but I'd memorized it from the legal documents, from the background research Diane's team had done. It was Robert Harrison's house. I sat there staring at the photos, my heart pounding. The listing had been up for 3 weeks. The description mentioned that the sellers were motivated and considering all offers. Reading between the lines, they needed to sell fast. Of course they did. Robert had lost his job. TechVantage had paid me $2.2 million, money that came from somewhere, and you could bet the company had made him partially accountable. His reputation was destroyed. His LinkedIn profile had been deactivated. Google searches of his name brought up articles about discrimination and misconduct. He was radioactive in the industry, and now he was trying to offload his house. I should have felt sympathy. Maybe a better person would have. But all I felt was a cold, calculated sense of rightness. This wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about something deeper, something symbolic. This man had looked at me, pregnant, black, excellent at my job, and decided I was disposable. He'd tried to erase me, to push me out, to make me disappear. He'd counted on me being too scared, too broken to fight back. He'd miscalculated spectacularly. And now I had the power to take something from him. Not in a violent way, not even in an illegal way, just in the most American way possible, through capitalism and cold, hard cash. I called my real estate agent, a sharp woman named Trina, who'd been helping me navigate the market. I found a house I want to see. Today, if possible. Which one? I sent her the listing. Buckhead, she said appreciatively. Nice area. Little pricey, but with your pre-approval, you're definitely in range. What time works for you? As soon as possible. We met at the house 2 hours later. It was even more impressive in person. Pristine white exterior. Perfectly manicured lawn that probably required a weekly landscaping service. A circular driveway where a BMW and a Mercedes had once sat. Now the driveway was empty, except for Trina's Lexus and my modest Honda Accord. The listing agent, a white woman in her 40s with a forced smile and desperate eyes, greeted us at the door. Welcome. This is such a special property. The owners have really loved this home, but they're relocating for work and need to sell quickly. Relocating. Right. She walked us through, pointing out features with rehearsed enthusiasm. The gourmet kitchen, the formal dining room, the home office with built-in shelves, the master bathroom with a soaking tub and separate shower. Every room was staged beautifully, impersonally, like the people who lived here had already been erased. I tried to picture Robert in these spaces, sitting at that kitchen island reading the newspaper, swimming in that pool on summer afternoons, hosting backyard barbecues for other executives who thought they were untouchable. And then I pictured something else. My daughter taking her first steps on these hardwood floors. Birthday parties in that backyard. Me, working from that home office, building something new. A life that wasn't defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I'd taken back. "What do you think?" Trina asked when we stepped outside, the listing agent giving us space to talk privately. "I want it," I said. "It's a great house, but there are a few issues we should consider. The roof will need replacing in the next 5 years, probably a $20,000 job. The HVAC system is older. I want it," I repeated. "Whatever it takes. I want this house." Trina looked at me carefully. She was good at reading people. That's what made her an excellent agent. "Aaliyah, is there something about this property specifically? Because if this is an emotional decision..." "It's not emotional," I lied. "It's strategic. The house is undervalued for the neighborhood. The sellers are motivated. It's a good investment." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Okay, what do you want to offer?" I thought about it. The listing was $875,000. In this market, I could probably get it for $850,000 or even less if I pushed. Save myself $25,000, but I didn't want to negotiate. I didn't want to go back and forth. Didn't want to risk losing it to another buyer. I wanted to make an offer so strong, so undeniable, that they'd have no choice but to accept. "Full asking price," I said. "Cash offer. 10-day close. No inspection contingency." Trina's eyebrows shot up. "Are you sure? That's leaving money on the table, and waiving inspection is risky." "I'm sure." "Draw up the offer." We submitted it that evening. The response came back in less than 4 hours. Accepted. I sat in my apartment, contract in hand, and I laughed. It started as a chuckle, then built into something bigger, something that came from deep in my belly, where my daughter was presumably wondering why her mother had lost her mind. I was buying Robert Harrison's house. The man who'd fired me for being pregnant was selling me his home because he couldn't afford it anymore after facing the consequences of his actions. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. Maya called that night. I'd texted her the news, couldn't keep it to myself. "You're buying his house?" She practically screamed into the phone. "Aaliyah, oh my God. This is the most powerful move I've ever witnessed. This is literally I'm living in my enemy's house energy. This is Beyoncé-level pettiness. Except it's not petty because you're actually just making a smart real estate investment while also making a statement about, Maya, breathe. I can't breathe. This is too good. Do you think he knows it's you? Not yet. The offer went through my real estate trust. My name isn't on any of the paperwork he'd see. But he'll know soon enough. Oh, to be a fly on the wall when he finds out. Please, please let me know his reaction. I found out his reaction 3 days later, through Trina. I had the strangest conversation with the listing agent. She told me over the phone. Apparently the seller, Mr. Harrison, asked who the buyer was. She told him it was a trust, which is standard for privacy. But he kept pushing, said he had a right to know who was buying his home. She finally told him your name, and he tried to back out of the contract. Said he wanted to reject the offer after all, that he'd changed his mind. I sat up straighter. Can he do that? No, the contract is binding. He accepted the offer. We're past the attorney review period, and you're paying cash with no contingencies. He has no legal grounds to back out without facing massive penalties. We're talking 6 figures in damages. His attorney apparently explained this to him in no uncertain terms. The listing agent said he was upset. Upset, I repeated. Her exact words were, Mr. Harrison is struggling with the situation, but the sale is proceeding. Closing is still scheduled for next Friday. After we hung up, I sat with that information. Robert Harrison, who'd looked me in the eye and fired me without hesitation, who'd dismissed my 6 years of excellent work like it meant nothing, was now struggling with the situation of having to sell me his house. Good. Let him struggle. Let him feel a fraction of what I felt sitting in that parking garage. crying after being discarded like trash. But also, and this was the part that felt like growth, I didn't need his suffering to validate my victory. I'd already won. The house was just a symbol, a beautiful, tangible symbol of how far I'd come. The closing happened on a Friday morning. I sat at a conference table in the title company's office, signing document after document while my daughter kicked energetically inside me. The sellers weren't present. That was typical for cash sales, but I suspected Robert would have avoided it regardless. When the final signature was done, the title agent handed me a folder with the deed and keys. "Congratulations, Ms. Johnson," she said warmly. "You're officially a homeowner." I held those keys in my hand, 3 of them on a simple ring, and I felt the weight of everything they represented. Not just a house, not just victory over someone who'd wronged me, but proof that I could take the worst thing that ever happened to me and transform it into something powerful. I drove to the house that afternoon, let myself in with my new keys, and walked through the empty rooms. The previous owners had already moved out, taken all their furniture and memories with them. I stood in the center of the living room, my hand on my belly, and I said out loud to the empty space, "This is ours now. Mine and hers. This is where we start over." My daughter kicked in response, and I smiled. The day I got the keys to Robert Harrison's house, my house, I didn't move in right away. I sat in the empty living room for an hour, just absorbing the space, letting the magnitude of what had happened settle into my bones. This wasn't just about real estate. This was about reclamation. This was about taking back power that had been stripped from me. This was about building a future on the foundation of justice, not revenge. Though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a certain satisfaction in knowing that Robert Harrison had to watch me claim what was once his. But first, I had work to do. The house needed to become a home, and I had exactly 3 weeks before my due date to make that happen. I hired a moving company, started ordering furniture, reached out to an interior designer, a Black woman named Simone, who specialized in creating spaces that honored African diaspora aesthetics while feeling contemporary and lived in. When I told her my story, she didn't charge me her usual consultation fee. "This project is bigger than money," she said, walking through the empty rooms with a measuring tape and a vision I couldn't yet see. "This is about creating a sanctuary, a place where you and your daughter can heal and grow and thrive. Let me help you do that." We planned everything. Warm earth tones in the living spaces, a nursery done in soft yellows and greens with African print accents, artwork from Black artists on every wall, bookshelves that would eventually hold Morrison and Baldwin and Hurston where Robert's business books had once sat. We'd replace his cold corporate aesthetic with something alive, something that breathed with culture and history and us. The furniture started arriving. A sectional sofa in burnt orange, a dining table made of reclaimed wood, a rocking chair for the nursery that Simone found at an estate sale. Vintage, sturdy, perfect for late-night feedings. Each piece felt intentional, chosen not just for function but for meaning. My mother flew in from South Carolina to help with the move. She walked through the house with tears in her eyes, touching the walls like she couldn't believe they were real. "Baby girl," she said, standing in the master bedroom with its vaulted ceilings and massive windows. "You did this. You stood up, you fought, and you won. We won, Mama. I couldn't have done it without you raising me to know my worth." She pulled me into a hug, her hand resting on my very pregnant belly. At 37 weeks, I was enormous, uncomfortable, and counting down the days. But I'd made a promise to myself. I wanted to be settled in this house before my daughter arrived. I wanted her first breath to be taken in a home that represented triumph, not trauma. The news about my purchase leaked, of course. Someone, maybe the listing agent, maybe a neighbor, maybe just the internet's terrifying ability to connect dots, figured out that Aaliyah Johnson had bought Robert Harrison's house. By the time I was unpacking boxes in my new kitchen, the story was everywhere. Justice served, woman fired for pregnancy buys former boss's house. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the ultimate comeback. How Aaliyah Johnson turned discrimination into power. Essence: pregnant and fired. She fought back and won, then bought her boss's house. The root: the articles were accompanied by photos. Me at the closing, me with my attorney, me standing in front of my new house with my hand on my belly and a smile that didn't quite hide the steel underneath. Social media exploded. Again. The hashtag #Aaliyah's house started trending. People were calling it the ultimate power move, reparations on a personal level, what winning looks like. Memes circulated showing before and after scenarios. How it started, fired while pregnant, versus how it's going, living in his house. Some people thought it was petty. They said I should have taken the high road, that buying his house was vindictive and unnecessary. But far more people understood what this really meant. A woman on Twitter wrote, "Y'all calling this petty, but this is what accountability looks like. He tried to destroy her life. She rebuilt it using the consequences of his actions. That's not petty. That's justice." Another, "Black women are always told to be quiet, be grateful, don't make waves." Aaliyah said, "I'm not just making waves, I'm buying the boat. That's the energy we need." The support was overwhelming. But so was the attention. News crews showed up at my house, which still felt surreal to say, asking for interviews. I did a few, carefully selected. I talked to Gayle King on CBS this morning via video call, sitting in my new living room with boxes still visible in the background. "Some people say buying your former boss's house is crossing a line," Gayle said, her tone more curious than judgmental. "What do you say to that?" I looked directly at the camera. "I say that Robert Harrison crossed a line when he fired me for being pregnant. He crossed a line when he tried to erase 6 years of excellent work. He crossed a line when he thought I'd just disappear quietly. I bought this house because it was a sound investment in a neighborhood I wanted to live in. The fact that it was his house? That's just the universe's way of balancing the scales. Do you have any regrets about how public this has become? None. Because my story isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's been discriminated against for being pregnant, for being a mother, for being a human being with a life outside of work. If my visibility helps even one woman find the courage to speak up, to fight back, to demand better, then it's worth every uncomfortable moment." The interview went viral. Clips circulated with captions like, "She said what needed to be said," and "This is what speaking truth to power looks like." But the most meaningful response came from the women who'd reached out to me throughout this journey. The DMs, emails, and letters kept coming. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. Women sharing their stories, thanking me for giving them hope, telling me they'd filed their own EOC charges after watching my fight. Destiny, Carmen, and Nia, the 3 women from TechVantage who'd come forward with their own stories, all reached out personally. We'd formed a bond through shared trauma and collective resistance. "You inspired me to go back to school," Nia wrote. "I'm getting my MBA. I'm going to start my own company so I never have to work for people like Robert Harrison again." Carmen had taken a position at a nonprofit fighting for workers' rights. Destiny was writing a book about her experience. We were all transforming our pain into purpose. Moving day was chaos. My mother directed traffic like a drill sergeant while I waddled around, pointing to where furniture should go and trying not to go into labor from the stress. Maya, Jasmine, Keisha, and several other friends showed up to help, turning the day into an impromptu celebration. "This is incredible," Jasmine said, walking through the house with a glass of sparkling cider. Everyone was drinking it in solidarity with my pregnancy. "You really did it, Aaliyah. You really turned everything around." "We did it," I corrected. "I couldn't have fought that battle alone. You all held me up." By evening, the house was starting to look lived in. Boxes were unpacked, furniture arranged, my daughter's nursery set up and waiting. We ordered pizza, enough for an army, and sat on my new back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I have to ask," Maya said, wiping pizza grease from her fingers. "Do you ever wonder what Robert is thinking right now? Like, does he drive by and see your car in the driveway?" I'd wondered that too. According to public records, Robert and his wife had downsized significantly. They were now renting a townhouse in a suburb 30 minutes outside the city. His LinkedIn still listed him as between opportunities. His career in Atlanta tech was effectively over. Honestly, I said, I hope he drives by. I hope he sees that I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. I hope it keeps him up at night, knowing that trying to destroy me only made me stronger. That's not petty at all, Keisha said with a grin. Oh, it's absolutely petty, I admitted. But it's also true, and sometimes the truth and pettiness overlap, and that's okay. We laughed, and it felt good. Not bitter or vengeful, just free. The kind of laughter that comes when you've walked through fire and come out the other side with your dignity intact and your bank account healthy. That night, after everyone left, I stood in my daughter's nursery. The walls were painted a soft sage green. African print curtains framed the window. The vintage rocking chair sat in the corner, waiting. A mobile hung above the crib, wooden animals painted in bright colors that would catch her eye when she was old enough to focus. I sat in that rocking chair and closed my eyes, my hands resting on my belly where my daughter was running out of room to kick. Almost time to meet you, little one, I whispered. Your mama fought hard to make sure you'd come into a world where she wasn't diminished or dismissed. I can't promise the world will always be fair, but I can promise I'll teach you to fight when it's not. I'll teach you that your voice matters, that your presence matters, that you never have to make yourself small for anyone. She kicked in response, her usual vigorous agreement to everything I said. 3 days later, at 2 a.m, my water broke. I called my mother first, then Maya, then my doctor. By dawn, I was at Northside Hospital, in a delivery room with monitors beeping and contractions that felt like my body was trying to turn itself inside out. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain and pressure and pushing, of my mother holding one hand and Maya holding the other, of nurses coaching me through breathing and doctors checking dilation and me thinking this is impossible. I can't do this except I have to because she's coming and I'm the only way out. And then, at 8:47 p.m. on June 3rd, my daughter entered the world. They placed her on my chest immediately. Tiny, screaming, perfect. All 7 pounds and 3 ounces of her, with a head full of dark curly hair and lungs that announced her arrival to everyone within a 3-mile radius. Hi, baby, I sobbed, touching her face with shaking fingers. Hi, Zora, I'm your mama. I'm your mama, and I love you so much. I'd named her after Zora Neale Hurston, a woman who'd fought for recognition in a world that tried to silence her, who'd written her truth even when others wanted her erased. It felt right. It felt like legacy. My mother cried. Maya cried. I definitely cried. The nurses probably cried too, though they maintained professional composure. She's beautiful, my mother whispered, touching Zora's tiny hand. She looks just like you did when you were born. She's going to change the world, Maya said with conviction. Look at what her mama did before she even got here. Imagine what this girl's going to do. I looked down at my daughter, my Zora, and I felt everything at once. Exhaustion and exhilaration, fear and fierce protectiveness, pride and purpose. This was why I'd fought. Not just for money or justice or vindication, for her. So she'd grow up knowing that when the world tries to make you small, you make yourself bigger. When they try to silence you, you speak louder. When they try to take what's yours, you take it back, and then you take what's theirs too, if that's what justice requires. We stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Friends visited, bringing flowers and gifts and tears of joy. The nurses all knew my story. Apparently, my case had been discussed in the hospital's diversity and inclusion training. One nurse, an older black woman named Patricia, held Zora and said, "This baby is blessed. She's got a warrior for a mama." We're all warriors, I replied. Some of us just get forced to prove it. When we finally brought Zora home, to my house, to the home I'd claimed from the rubble of discrimination, I carried her through the front door and walked her through every room. This is your home, I told her as she slept against my chest. This is where you'll take your first steps, where you'll learn to read, where you'll dream big dreams. And when you're old enough, I'll tell you the story of how we got here. How your mama fought and won. How justice isn't just something we hope for, it's something we take. I stood in the living room, in the house that used to belong to the man who tried to destroy me, holding the daughter who'd given me purpose to keep fighting, and I smiled. 6 months after bringing Zora home, I stood on my back patio watching her sleep in her stroller, the late December sun filtering through the bare branches of the oak trees that bordered my property. My property. Even after all this time, those words still carried weight. The house had transformed completely. What was once Robert Harrison's sterile showcase had become a living, breathing home. Zora's toys were scattered across the living room floor. My mother's quilts, handed down through 3 generations, draped across the couches. The walls displayed artwork I'd collected from Black artists across Atlanta. A vibrant painting of women in traditional African dress from a gallery in Sweet Auburn. A mixed media piece about motherhood from an artist I'd met at a community event. Photographs of civil rights leaders that I'd found at a local flea market. This house told our story now. Not his, but the transformation wasn't just physical. My entire life had shifted in ways I couldn't have imagined a year ago when I was sitting in that parking garage, crying and recording a video that would change everything. I'd started my own consulting firm, Johnson & Associates, specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies for tech companies. The irony wasn't lost on me. The industry that had tried to discard me was now paying me 6 figures to tell them how not to be discriminatory. My first client was a startup in Austin that had reached out after reading about my case. Then another. Then another. By the end of my first quarter in business, I'd signed 8 clients and hired 2 employees, both Black women who'd experienced their own workplace discrimination. We worked from my home office, the same room where Robert had probably made decisions about people's careers without considering their humanity. Now that room was filled with vision boards, client proposals, and framed photos of Zora that reminded me why I was doing this work. "You're building something important," Diane told me during one of our monthly coffee catch-ups. We'd become friends through the legal battle, the kind of friendship forged in the fire of fighting together. "You're not just helping companies avoid lawsuits. You're changing culture. That's legacy work. Legacy." The word resonated deeply. I thought about legacy a lot these days, especially when I held Zora and watched her discover the world with wide, curious eyes. What would I tell her about this chapter of our lives? How would I explain that her existence in this house, in this life of comfort and security, was built on my refusal to be silenced? The media attention had finally started to calm down, though I still received interview requests regularly. I was selective now, only saying yes when I felt the platform could genuinely amplify important conversations about workplace discrimination, about Black women's experiences, about the intersection of motherhood and career. I'd been featured in a documentary about pregnancy discrimination that premiered at Sundance and was later picked up by Netflix. I'd given a TED Talk that had been viewed over 2 million times. I'd written an op-ed for the New York Times about how companies weaponize cultural fit to exclude women of color. But the work I was most proud of was quieter, more personal. I'd started a fund, the Zora Fund for Workplace Justice, using a portion of my settlement money. It provided financial support to women fighting employment discrimination who couldn't afford legal representation. In just 6 months, we'd helped 12 women file EEOC charges and supported 3 through trial. 2 had already won their cases. "You're giving other women what you had to fight for alone," Maya said when I told her about the fund. "That's powerful." The fund's first major success story was a woman named Shanice, a single mother in Birmingham who'd been fired from her nursing job after taking leave to care for her sick child. Her case echoed mine in painful ways: the sudden termination, the flimsy justification, the assumption that she'd stay quiet because she needed the money too badly to fight. But with the fund's support, she'd fought, and won. $450,000 settlement and her job back if she wanted it, though she'd decided to go work somewhere that actually valued her. "Thank you," she'd written in an email. "Thank you for proving it's possible to win. Thank you for giving me the resources to fight. Thank you for seeing me." I read that email while nursing Zora at 3 in the morning. tears streaming down my face in the dark nursery. Thank you for seeing me. That's what it had always been about. Being seen, being valued, being treated like a human being whose existence mattered beyond what she could produce for someone else's profit. Robert Harrison's name still came up occasionally, usually in cautionary tales about discrimination or in LinkedIn discussions about toxic leadership. I'd heard through the grapevine, Atlanta's professional community was small enough that information traveled, that he'd tried to rebrand himself as a consultant, but couldn't find clients. His reputation was permanently damaged. His career, effectively over, part of me felt something resembling sympathy. But mostly I felt nothing. He'd become irrelevant to my story. He was the villain in Act 1, but we were well into Act 3 now, and this story was about triumph, not him. I had, however, run into his wife once. At Whole Foods, of all places. I was in the produce section, Zora strapped to my chest in a carrier. When I saw her examining avocados with the kind of intense focus people use when they're trying to look busy. She looked smaller than I'd imagined. Tired. Older. She glanced up, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she looked away quickly, grabbed 2 avocados without checking if they were ripe, and hurried toward the checkout. I didn't follow her. Didn't say anything. Just stood there holding an organic bunch of kale, feeling the weight of everything unspoken between us. She'd benefited from the system that discriminated against me. She'd lived in luxury purchased partially through the devaluation of women like me, but she'd also lost that luxury when the system finally held her husband accountable. I didn't know if she blamed me or blamed him or blamed the universe. I didn't particularly care. Her discomfort wasn't my responsibility to manage. That encounter stayed with me for a few days, though. It reminded me that consequences ripple outward, touching people in ways we can't always predict or control. Robert's choices hadn't just affected me, they'd affected his family, his colleagues, everyone connected to him. But that didn't make those choices my fault. And it didn't make my victory something to apologize for. Maya and James came over one Saturday in mid-December to help me decorate for Christmas, Zora's first. We hung lights on the porch, put up a tree in the living room, played Motown Christmas songs while drinking spiked hot chocolate and laughing about the chaos at TechVantage these days. The company had undergone major changes. Marcus Bradley, the CEO, had resigned under pressure. Robert's replacement, a Black woman named Dr. Simone Patterson, had implemented sweeping policy reforms, mandatory bias training, transparent promotion processes, a dedicated ombudsperson for discrimination complaints. The company was trying to repair its reputation, though the damage would take years to fully heal. Dr. Patterson asked about you, Maya said, adjusting an ornament on the tree. She wanted to know if you'd be interested in consulting with them on their DEI initiatives. I almost laughed. TechVantage wants to hire me? After everything? She said, and I quote, Ms. Johnson clearly understands the problems in our industry better than anyone. If she's willing to help us fix them, we should consider ourselves fortunate. She mentioned a significant consulting fee. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No. Tell her I appreciate the acknowledgement, but I have no interest in helping them. They need to do that work themselves, with their own reckoning, not with me as their absolution. I figured you'd say that. Maya grinned, but I had to ask. James, who'd been quietly assembling Zora's Christmas gifts, looked up. You know what's wild? A year ago, you were working for them, hoping for a promotion, trying to prove yourself. Now they're begging for your time and expertise, and you don't need them at all. He was right. The power dynamic had completely inverted. I didn't need TechVantage or any company to validate my worth. I'd built my own platform, my own business, my own legacy. As we finished decorating, my mother called to tell me she'd booked her flight to spend Christmas with us. I want to see my grandbaby in her first Christmas dress, she said, her voice warm with joy. And I want to spend the holiday in that beautiful house with my beautiful daughter who did the impossible. It wasn't impossible. Mama, it was just hard. Baby girl, sometimes those are the same thing. That night, After Maya and James left, after Zora was asleep in her crib, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and my laptop. I'd been working on something for weeks, a memoir proposal. Several publishers had reached out after my TED Talk, interested in my story. I opened the document and read what I'd written. This is not a story about revenge. This is a story about justice, about refusing to be erased, about fighting back when the system tells you to stay quiet, about building something beautiful from the rubble of discrimination. This is a story about what happens when a Black woman says no more and means it. This is a story about my daughter and the world I'm fighting to create for her. This is my truth. I added another paragraph. When Robert Harrison fired me, he thought he was ending my story. He thought I'd disappear quietly, taking my pregnancy and my inconvenient existence somewhere he'd never have to think about again. He thought wrong. Because this story was just beginning. I saved the document and closed my laptop. Outside, Atlanta's December night was crisp and cold, the kind of weather that makes you grateful for warmth and home and safety. I walked upstairs to check on Zora one more time before bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. I adjusted her blanket and kissed her forehead gently. "Your mama did good, baby girl," I whispered. "Not perfect, but good. And that's enough." The house settled around us. Our house, full of our memories, our future, our love. Somewhere out there, Robert Harrison was living with the consequences of his actions. Somewhere out there, other women were fighting their own battles against discrimination. And here, in this house that I'd claimed from the ashes of injustice, I was building a legacy that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with us. I thought about the video I'd recorded in that parking garage, the raw, tearful confession that started everything. Over 3 million views now. Thousands of comments. Hundreds of women saying it gave them courage to speak up, to fight back, to demand better. I'd gone viral for my pain. But I'd be remembered for my power. As I got ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a notification. An email from a woman in Seattle. "I saw your story. I've been dealing with discrimination at my job for 2 years. I was afraid to speak up. But after watching your TED Talk, I filed an EEOC charge today. Thank you for showing me it's possible to win." I smiled and typed a response. "You're already winning by refusing to stay silent. Keep fighting. Keep documenting. Keep believing you deserve better. Because you do. We all do." I climbed into bed, the same bed that probably cost Robert Harrison thousands of dollars, in the same master bedroom where he'd slept believing he was untouchable, and I felt only peace. The next morning, I posted on Instagram for the first time in weeks. A photo of Zora in her Christmas pajamas, sitting under our tree surrounded by wrapped presents. Her face scrunched up in that expression babies make when they're concentrating on something invisible. The caption read, "A year ago, I was fired for being pregnant. Today, I'm running my own business, living in a home I bought with the settlement from fighting back, and watching my daughter discover the magic of her first Christmas." To everyone who supported me, who believed me, who fought alongside me, thank you. To everyone still fighting their own battles against discrimination, keep going. Justice isn't given. It's taken. And you deserve it. Merry Christmas from our house to yours. The post got 500,000 likes in 2 hours, but the number I cared about most was one. Zora, sleeping peacefully in my arms while I rocked her in that vintage chair. In the nursery I'd created, in the house I'd claimed, in the life I'd built from the rubble of someone else's cruelty. This was victory. Not loud or vengeful, just quiet and certain in ours. I kissed my daughter's forehead and whispered the words that had become my mantra, my prayer, my promise. We won, baby girl, and we're just getting started. Outside, Atlanta continued its bustling life, a city that had watched my fall and my rise, that had witnessed my pain and my power. A city where a pregnant Black woman had been discarded and had refused to disappear. A city where I'd bought my oppressor's house and turned it into a home for my daughter, a city where impossible. Things became possible when you fought hard enough, spoke loud enough, refused to accept injustice as inevitable. I was Aaliyah Johnson, mother, entrepreneur, fighter, survivor, victor. And this? This was just the beginning of what I'd build.